Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here. Now that my two obligatory informative videos are done for the day, it's time to talk about current events in the online fitness community. And by the way, I do have some training footage up, so go check that out in my informative stuff for the day if you want to see that. But I'm going to put on my +5 hat of weaponsmithing, work on skilling up my crafting a little bit. Let's talk about something that's happened in the last week again. And a lot of people are like, why aren't you going to talk about the strap-on destiny thing? I'll get to that later when I feel like it. But yeah, that needs to be gotten to because that nonsense is just getting ridiculous. But there's a lot of talk after the whole Piana thing about racism. Everyone's talked about it. Everyone's talked about it. I mean, everyone from Chris Jones to Vegan Gains has chimed in, just kind of given their take on it. And what was interesting is that Vegan Gains chimed in on mine, or the fact that I made the comments that I made. And again, that's going to shock a lot of people because him being half black, people are going to assume, a lot of people would assume he might be sensitive to racism. That's not the case. That's an interesting point. There you go. A stereotype removed right there, huh? Stereotype removed. Because he doesn't seem to be. And he says, too many people are out looking for racism that's not real on the internet. They're looking for it all the time. And he said, try to pretend I'm one of those people, which I thought was really bizarre. And again, that shows that Richard, you don't actually watch all my content. You don't watch the other half of the content I make. I have a political channel. My firearm channel is my political channel too. Actually, quite the opposite. I actually believe that the majority of stuff that people today call racism isn't racism. I think people have broadened the term into the point to where it's no longer even a negative anymore, in the sense that 90% of the stuff that people call racism isn't racism, and it's not even morally a problem. It's neutral. They try to make everything racist, and I agree with that statement, and that's something I talk about. But here's the difference. I'm one of those people. I'm a middle-aged white male conservative. Okay? I'm the group of person who is most likely to say something isn't racist. Okay? I'm the first person to say that's not racism. That's not racism, and I'm going to give you guys an example in a minute. Yet I saw this, and I'm saying, that's racism. I don't think it's that big of a deal, but it's racism. Let's just call it what it is. And there's a reason I say that. Because I define racism with the traditional meaning of the word, not the modern meaning of the word. If you don't like a culture or a religion or a country, like all of a sudden you're racist. That's not racist. Racism means that you either have hatred towards another group due to their ethnicity and biological traits, such as skin color, skin tone, things like that. You have a hatred for them for that, or you believe that one race or ethnicity is inferior or superior on a genetic and biological level. That's what racism means. You mean a group is they're better, they're superior, or another group is inferior and less human. Okay, that's racism. Anything else that people have is oftentimes just a stereotype. And stereotypes are often, not always, are oftentimes, more often than not, based upon some degree of truth. Okay, stereotypes are usually based upon something. They don't just appear out of nowhere. There's at least some sort of basis that makes that stereotype become popularized. Stereotypes don't even have to be negative, and that's kind of the point. Stereotype, Asians are good at math. Stereotype, black people are good at sports. Okay, that's a stereotype. In fact, it implies that they're better at something. Is it real racism? Guess it depends on how superior you see them as a group. Those could be considered racism, even though they're positive. All right, and that's kind of the point, because if they're positive, if one group is better at something, that means other groups are worse at it as a demographic. Therefore, it implies a degree of superiority or inferiority, depending on what we're talking about. That's more racism light. Racism light. But this seems to be what everyone's talking about with this event, so let's actually talk about that. And it was interesting because he brought up something that I did. It was a video, and people took that out of context, I suppose. They didn't watch the whole video. They didn't see the context. It was talking about Native Americans. Interestingly enough, my family has papers. I'm 1/16th Cherokee. I don't identify with being Native American because it's such a small amount. I don't consider myself one, but I have some ancestry there. I just don't identify that way. It doesn't mean that much to me. And it was me talking about my first Thanksgiving back in the United States. You guys need to remember, I spent over 3 years in the United Kingdom. Okay, Thanksgiving is an American holiday. and something that people who have lived abroad understand. Anyone who's lived in another country, for any extended period of time, understand this. We're called expats. And one of the things that you notice the most when you live in another country is how people perceive your holidays where you're from. It's interesting because no one celebrates them, and normally it's something that you have growing up. If you live in the United States, Thanksgiving, Christmas, the 4th of July. I'm not saying Christmas is only celebrated in America, by the way. It obviously isn't. Those are like your big holidays, Halloween. All these holidays we take for granted if you grow up in that region as big major holidays. They don't celebrate the 4th of July. 4th of July is celebrating independence and winning a war against the country I was living in. Okay, they don't celebrate that. I can promise you they don't. Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving's an American holiday. Okay, Thanksgiving's an American holiday, and I was making the joke there because I had multiple people, and this was weird to me, asked me when I was living in the UK when I said, "Oh man, Thanksgiving's coming up. I'm going to be here, and no one wants to be celebrating Thanksgiving. No one's going to be eating any sort of pie or turkey or anything." And I had Brits ask me, "Well, what's Thanksgiving?" And I tried to explain to them, "So what, like you're celebrating the genocide of the Native Americans?" Like I actually kind of had that asked to me. And so that was kind of the joke that I made, and that was the way that I would return that joke of, yeah, that's exactly what Thanksgiving is about. That's me being sarcastic. And I did do that to a couple of different Brits. Like, yeah, that's exactly what we do. Our Thanksgiving, we sit around and celebrate the genocide of the Native Americans, and we pass around blankets covered with smallpox. And, and because they don't understand the holiday, because it's weird to them, because they've never experienced it. But, it was interesting in the same month of November, I would look back at them and go, "Oh, well, you guys have Gunpowder Day in November. Wait, you're celebrating a man being, like, dismembered in public and burned?" Well, yeah. Wait, you're celebrating a man who blew up Parliament on Gunpowder Day being publicly executed in a gruesome way. That's a national holiday for you. You don't think that's weird? But that was kind of the whole point of it. And I did make the side caveat, and that's the thing that people need to remember. Yeah, I probably wouldn't have been born had there not been a genocide against Native Americans. Now, most of that was disease. That was the biggest part, and some of it was purposeful. But you know what? Had the U.S. not formed, because I have ancestors from different places in Europe who would have never met together. All right, everything from Eastern Europe up to the United Kingdom. Okay, I have ancestors from all over Europe, and then I even had some Native American ancestors. Had that not happened, I wouldn't have been born. And that's the thing people need to remember. There's a lot of tragic events in the past that happened, but you know what? They're tragic, but had they not happened, you wouldn't have been here. You wouldn't have been here. So, while it might have sucked for the people involved, that's the interesting thing with the world. They're survivors. The people who survived, whatever these things happen to be, that's us. Every one of us wouldn't be here had tragedies in the past. Sometimes horrific tragedies, sometimes racist tragedies, sometimes genocide, sometimes slavery. These are all in our past, and many of us, the majority of us, had a lot of these events not happened, we wouldn't be alive today. Now, that's a messed up way of looking at the world, but that's reality. Doesn't make those things right, but aren't you glad to be alive? Aren't you glad to be alive? So you got to accept that fact. But that doesn't mean that you should think that they're, wonderful, amazing things. You still be glad that you're here, and had they not happened, you wouldn't be here. A whole lot of us might not be here had we not dropped bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. That's the real world. Now, that was where I came from in that video that he threw out there. But that was me talking about that, of being an expat and living in a country where people don't understand. I went 3 years without a Thanksgiving, and every time a Thanksgiving rolled around, and this is something everyone who lives in another country feels. You talk to people out there, all expats feel this. When your national holidays or your national traditions or your cultural traditions come around and you're the only one who celebrates them, you feel like an outsider. And go live in another country for a few years and you guys will understand that. And then why I kind of had the sarcastic joke about it, because they really were insulting about something that we consider to be a good tradition that we enjoy growing up. So yeah, it was me mocking it. Now, that being said, let's talk about that though. Why the whole racism thing with rich is legitimately racism. I've said something on here before, so people say, that's racist. No, it's not racist. When Elgin and I had a bit of a falling out, Elgin moans from Elgin's extreme intensity. Inner city, you know, you guys know what I'm talking about. I'm kind of said, okay, fine, you've got a tiny Asian dick. Now, people are like, oh man, I'm pissed at that. That's racist. No, that's not racist. That's a stereotype. Now, here's the thing. I didn't say his dick was tiny because he was Asian. I said he had a tiny Asian dick. The only reason people took it that way is because it matches a stereotype. If I saw a dude who was black and said he had a tiny black dick, even though I said the same thing, ethnicity of his dick and the fact that it was tiny, would it have been the same? No, because it doesn't match a stereotype. And obviously that stereotype's not true. That stereotype isn't true, obviously. Not every Asian dude has a tiny dick. Let's be honest here. That's not reality. But that's a stereotype. But I didn't say it was because his dick was Asian. Had I said it was because his dick was Asian, okay, we could then argue, is that racism or is it a stereotype? And therein lies the difference. Therein lies the difference. Because it comes down to, is it inferior or superior? Is having a small dick versus an average sized dick an inferior trait or a superior trait? See, that one's relative. You can't clearly define that. There's a lot of chicks with really small vaginas. Or gay dudes, there are gay dudes who have really small butts. They might not appreciate a big dick. They might like a smaller one. So to them, is that a compliment? It's all a matter of perspective, isn't it? Because for it to become a racist statement, you have to have a clear understanding that having a small versus medium average sized dick actually is truly a superior or an inferior trait, objectively speaking. Same thing, another stereotype regarding dick size. BBC, the big black dick, right? Everyone talks about that. Not based on full truth. There's a degree of truth to it. It's not based entirely on truth. In fact, there were statistics done on it. That's been studied. That's how messed up it is. This has actually been studied. It's been studied. There's a degree of truth to it, but it's not even close to an absolute. But the thing is it an inferior or a superior trait? I guess it's a matter of perspective. Some people don't like a big dick. Some people like an average one. Some people like a small one. It's all a matter of perspective, isn't it? So, is it racist without an objective, inferior, superior, quantitative perspective? Or is it just a stereotype? It's a stereotype. Because in many cases, having a big dick isn't advantageous. Therefore, it's not racism. Okay, another perfect one, statistics. Because that's the thing. Racism has to be defined as something biologically wrong or an inferior about a group. Okay, racist stereotype or a racial-based stereotype. In the United States, black people commit more violent crime. Well, that's pretty well documented in the literature. The FBI will tell you it's true. All the police documentation, the court records will tell you it's true. Now, here's the question, though. What's the cause of it? Because that's where we got to look at it. Because right now, it's just a statistic. It's just a statistic. That's all it is. I'm going to say a statistic is racist. And it's a stereotype. It's a stereotype based on statistics. Now, here's the thing. Then you got to say, well, what's the cause of that higher crime rate? Because that's the key thing. When we're talking about is something racist or not, what's the cause? Is it because there's something wrong with this group of people, that they're just more violent and commit more crime because they can't control themselves? Because there's something internal in them? All right, that would mean that's a racist idea then. What if we then say, well, it's true, but it seems to be based on a history of socioeconomic disparity, history of segregation, a history of a culture developing as a result of segregation, slavery, poverty, and ignorance that contributes to, in the long term, a higher crime rate? How about the destruction of the family in black communities contributing to a higher crime rate? So if we then look at it and say it's caused by external factors, that same statistic and that same stereotype is no longer based upon some sort of perceived inferiority. Therefore, it's not racist. See the difference here, guys? There's a big difference between the two. There's a difference between the two. Stereotypes are oftentimes based on something objective. There's oftentimes reason these stereotypes exist, and you got statistics. You got to look for the cause of those things, because the cause and the belief of the cause is where the racism lays. If a person says and they believe that that disparity in crime rates is caused by a biological inferiority, that's now racism, okay? But the statistic itself isn't. Statistic itself is not racist. So, how does this come back to the rich Piana thing? I'm not out looking for racism. But here's what happened. You have a white guy who in anger said the N-word multiple times, talking about multiple individuals actually, okay? He then further implied that his girl, people were like, well, he said white trash. He did. And why was she white trash? Because she loved apparently black people. So that made her an inferior as a white person in his eyes, because to call someone white trash is to imply that they're inferior to other white people. And if the reason is because she might have loved a man of a different color, okay, that's implying that she is not even worthy. Okay, that's implying that there's something inferior with that other group, that she shouldn't even be considering it. Now, the other kicker of why else was it racist, besides the fact he dropped the N-word over and over, the fact that he was disgusted that a black man had kissed her cheek, that he was disgusted and wanted to throw up. Again, implying an absolute disgust. And that's the difference, guys. Okay, maybe a lot of people have uttered a racial slur in anger. Okay, a lot of people have, who aren't necessarily racist. It was a combination of the things. It was the whole demeanor of the conversation, of dropping the N-word repeatedly. The implication that someone who was white, who had been with a black person, he didn't even necessarily say had sex either, by the way, guys. What sex wasn't even mentioned. It was a kiss on the cheek. That she must love black people, so therefore she is white trash and an inferior white person. Okay, this is a racist mentality right there. That's a standard racist stereotype. That's very prevalent in historic racism in the United States. That exact mindset. Okay. Furthermore, the fact that a black man had kissed her cheek said it disgusted him. And it wasn't because another man kissed her cheek. It was very specifically that she had let the N-word kiss her cheek. That it was disgusting and he wanted to throw up. That implies an actual physical disgust towards a specific race. That's textbook racism. That's not ambiguous. You know, these other things are ambiguous. Stereotypes, statistics. All right, this is actual disgust and loathing, specifically towards a specific ethnic group with the most derogatory ethnic slur for that group being used. I'm sorry, you don't have to look for racism. I'm one of the people saying, guys, most of the stuff people talk about out there isn't racism, okay? Disliking a culture isn't racism. Disliking a religion isn't racism. Disliking people from another country, specific country, that's not racism. But having disgust and hatred towards a person because of their skin color and race, that's racism. That's racism. What else are you going to call it? What else are you going to call it? Alright guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.